You're not going to realize how little you've grown if that's the truth for you. So look at your inflection points, look at the big things that have happened, and figure out, are they trending up? Are they trending down? Are they staying the same?
And the webcam in my laptop didn't exist 5 years ago. So just don't lose sight of that perspective of how high the quality of our life really is versus what we think it is because we see all these other people's amazing lives on Instagram.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, Next Level You weekly live podcast. Week number 93. We are going to talk about finding perspective in the journey. So Alan and I have been at this for, I think the overall podcast thing has been close to 5 years now. Alan will tell you 10, depending on the day you ask him. But throughout this journey, I think we're very blessed because we have this giant opportunity to look back at our old work, to look back at our social media, to listen to old episodes. We have so much perspective. It's painful often, but we have that and a lot of people don't. So today, we want to help you find perspective in your journey.
You got me on that one.
What did I get you on?
You got me on that one. The 10 years thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time is a man-made construct. So,
do you want to go first or me, man?
do you want to set the table? You have anything to set the table with, or do you want me to roll?
I do. So live podcasts for anyone who's new, we do 40 minutes keynote style where we give 5 points each and we hammer them. Lessons and stories. Then we do 20 minutes Q&A. Amy is behind the scenes. Wherever you are watching this live, you can comment your question wherever you are, LinkedIn or Facebook, in our private Facebook group, Next Level Nation. Comment your question. Amy, she will come on for the last 20 minutes Q&A section. She will read your question anonymously.
Wonderful. I was thinking of this when we were prepping. I was thinking, okay, what can I talk about? What stories do I have? What lessons do I have? What experiences do I have that I can really share that will help people? I remember back when I used to live in Worcester and I started journaling. Alan and I were talking one day and I said, honestly, I should probably start journaling. I've never done it. I don't know what it's supposed to do, but I'm going to start. My journaling habit in the beginning was I would track our podcast listens. I would track how many clients I had. I would track how much money I was making. And I would track the amount of fears chased. So if I had a discovery call with a client, if Alan and I did a podcast interview where I was nervous, I would write that down as a fear chased. And it's such an interesting thing to look back because, I mean, if you look back and see the podcast listens when they were in the 100,000s or the 200,000s, that seems like forever ago. When I look back and I have the notes written down, try to get 5 clients total over the next month. And now Alan and I have, 40-something clients, 50-something, including group coaching. It's wild to think about that. It's wild. One of the goals was, I think it was to make $2,000 a month or something. That was one of my, and again, I'm not laughing because if you're out there, maybe that's where you're at. But I remember how difficult that was. I remember how much of a barrier that seemed. I remember that it seemed impossible at the time. And I remember that would have been life-changing for me at that point in this journey. That's wonderful perspective to have when you think now we're doing way, 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 way better than that. So my first point is journaling. Maybe you don't have a journaling practice because you're thinking, I don't want to spend the time doing that. I don't know that I'll find value in that. One thing I can promise you, I can't promise you you'll find value in the day-to-day, although it did help me when I was doing it. I can promise you it will help you from the terms of perspective. Again, you don't have podcast episodes maybe. Maybe you don't post a ton on social media. Maybe your life isn't super public and super captured through photographs and video and audio, so you don't have that opportunity to find perspective. But if you journal, it's even more powerful because you're writing things that you're not telling other people. I think that's an important part is not only are you seeing what you were talking about, what you were thinking, you're writing down what you're feeling. You're writing down your fears. You're writing down your overwhelms. You're writing down your boundaries. And when you look back on those and you realize, oh, those aren't the things that I deal with anymore, that is a wonderful, wonderful form of perspective.
So this was probably 2 years into Kevin and I's podcast journey, maybe 2.5. And we reached out to Isabella Picard. We interviewed her, and then Isabella Picard introduced us to someone named Eric LeGrand. And Eric LeGrand, we went to, I believe, New Jersey to meet them together, and we did a 4-person podcast. And at the time, Kevin and I were overwhelmed. We were doing what we thought was a lot of work back then. And for anyone who's tried to do social media full time and post once per day every single day, it is challenging, and I take nothing from that. But I'll never forget when we went into Eric LeGrand's house. So Eric LeGrand was a Rutgers football player who got injured and got paralyzed from the neck down. And I will never forget when Kevin and I found out that he does his social media with his mouth. So his wheelchair has a device on it that he can use his phone with a stylus that's in his mouth. And from that moment on, Kevin and I were so inspired by Eric that we never complained again about having to do social media. And so my first point is everyone has challenges, and honestly, some of them are far worse than yours. You can't lose perspective. And so for everyone out there, it's like, I got to go to the gym every day, and I'm overwhelmed, and I can't find time for the gym. It's like, think of Eric. Think of Isabella Picard. Think of people who got injured that would do anything to go to the gym. I think about this stuff all the time. Eric has inspired me so much because he accomplishes more in a day than some people who have a fully capable body, and he got injured. So just never forget that other people out there do have it worse than you, and how dare we take our gifts for granted and complain when, quite frankly, the things that we're complaining about, like doing social media once a day, are far more challenging for other people.
That was episode number 41, which blows my mind. And I think we interviewed Eric 3 times total.
Yeah.
1 with Bella, and then I think 2 solo. I remember that. Alan and I picked up Bella. We went to Starbucks. We drove 5 hours. It was a wonderful trip. And getting time to spend time with Bella is always a wonderful experience.
And the dog, Diesel.
Diesel, the dog that could eat me if he wanted to.
Dog/horse.
Yeah, it was a big dog. Cane Corso, one of the dogs I wanted in the past. Number 2. So this might be against advice that people have been given or advice that people give. I don't think comparison is a bad thing. I think you need to know where the ceiling is and where the floor is of the thing that you're doing. So I had a client recently who said, I'm at 9,000 downloads for the first year. It doesn't feel very good. I feel like I'm not succeeding. And I said, well, number one, I appreciate the fact that you don't feel like you're succeeding. I empathize with that. For context, for perspective in your journey, just so you know, when Alan and I started this, we had 1,052 downloads in our first year. And that was doing social media every day. That was being consistent. Not in the very beginning. In the very beginning, I probably wasn't super consistent, but since we partnered, we had never missed. And you have to know what the average is. Most people last between 7 episodes and 21. So if you're 100 episodes in, you have made it further than the vast majority of people who started a podcast. If you're 15 years into business, you have made it much further than most people make it, because most businesses don't last 15 years. I was in the gym a couple months ago, and I was bench pressing 225 pounds. And I was thinking to myself, I only did that for 5 reps. I feel like I should be able to do that way more. I feel like I'm way stronger than that. How many other people can bench press 225 pounds? Because I needed perspective. I need to know, where do I fall statistically with other people? And again, do the numbers actually mean anything when it comes to something like that? Probably not. I don't know how accurate they are, but I don't remember. I don't remember what it was. I think it was like maybe 10% or something. I don't remember. But whatever it was, it highlighted the fact that, oh, Kev, you're taking this strength for granted. You've lost sight of the perspective here. Alan and I did an episode recently on the law of familiarity. The law of familiarity creeps in. It creeps in, and it's why it's super important for you to find perspective before your new normal sets in. That's something I'm going to touch on later here, but don't think that comparison is a negative thing. I believe it's positive because you have to know where you fit in. You have to know what percentage you're at. Alan and I did this recently. I said, Alan, I need to know, what is the average consumption rate of a podcast episode? And Alan said, why do you need to know? It's probably better than most. And I said, I know, but how do I know it's better than most if I don't know what most are? That's the way I'm driven. That helps me out a ton. And I think one of the reasons is you're either going to highlight your insecurity and you're going to realize, I'm not doing as well as I thought, or you're going to raise your confidence and realize, wait, you guys had 1,000 downloads in your first year and I had 9 times that, and you guys have 500,000 downloads now. Like, play that number out in your head. So that's an important distinction. What if you finding out that you're way ahead of where we were, where whoever it is was, allows you to keep going, versus you stop because your awareness isn't high enough and you don't think you're successful when you actually are, when you have comparison.
All right, so imagine this. It's Kevin and I 4 years ago. Let's say 5 years ago, very beginning. Okay, Conversations Change Lives is a podcast I had. The Hyperconscious podcast is a podcast that he had. I was his first guest. He was my first guest. It is still on YouTube, and it will not probably stay there long. It's on my YouTube. The very first Hyperconscious episode, Kevin swears within the first 10 seconds. So he's
first
pretty,
5 seconds.
Yeah, first 5 seconds. Welcome to the mother effing Hyperconscious podcast. So it's an embarrassing podcast for both of us.
Yep.
But imagine it's 5 years ago, okay? And I say, Kev, in 5 years, we're going to have a 13-person global virtual team. We're going to have 50-plus clients. We're going to make more than $30,000 per month in gross revenue. We're going to be projected to reach $1 million by the end of 2022. And we're going to be doing a weekly live podcast. We're going to be doing an episode every single day. We're going to be a top 100 self-improvement global show. We're going to have a bunch of different departments. We're going to have a website department. We're going to have a podcast department. We're going to have a social media department. We're going to be getting guests on other shows. We're going to have this incredible peak performing team. We're all going to track our habits every single day. No one's going to miss, except for occasionally. And it's going to be this amazing thing. We're going to host an event, a live event every quarter. We're going to do an annual retreat in a place with 45 acres in a multi-million-dollar mansion. It's going to be unbelievable. He would have said, Alan, what are you smoking, man?
Smoking that good stuff.
What are you talking about? Yeah. And my point here is perspective. Everything I just said is 1,000% true. It's real. It's happening. But if I had said it back then, he would have thought I was nuts, like most people still do now. Perspective. You have to reflect on the past. Remember that your greatest challenge today might have at one point been just a dream. I have 20 clients right now from all over the world. It's unbelievable. Okay, some from Australia, some from Italy, team all over the world. At one point, that would have been a dream. I remember saying I want 10 clients. I remember saying I want 5 clients at $50 a week. Then I remember saying I want 10 clients at $100 a week. Okay, now I have 20 clients and I'm paid way more per hour than that. And my point here is this. It's really, really difficult. I am very overwhelmed. I coach the entire team bi-weekly. I coach all of my clients bi-weekly. Some of them who are used to the way I used to do things, which was more consistent, being engaged in WhatsApp and connecting with them daily for accountability. Some of them are a little bit frustrated because I'm not as available as I once was. Perspective. Finding perspective in the journey. You have to reflect on the past and understand that my biggest challenge today is how do I do all of this? But that's exactly the dream I once wanted. And if I don't keep that perspective, I might wake up in the morning and go, oh, this is so hard. I woke up this morning and I'm like, we were on a trip to Maine this past weekend, so I'm behind. I'm very behind today. And I could easily lose perspective and say, oh, this sucks. Or I could say, Alan, you work for yourself. You have an incredible peak performing global team. All of your dreams are coming true, right? You have to keep that perspective, and that's my point. So what is now your greatest challenge might have at one point been just a dream. You can't lose sight of that.
Impossibility is perspective also. And that's something that was highlighted to me when Alan was saying all that. Yeah, those are all awesome things, and my life is way better than it was before, and I love that. I'm happy. I've worked very, very hard for that. But if you're watching this or listening to this, understand that possibility now becomes a perspective for you. It becomes inspiration. Like, what is inspiration at the end of the day? It's a different perspective that moves you. It's something that wasn't there that now is. And you can think of, and I was thinking of this when you were talking, Alan, I wonder, and I don't know the stat because I'm just winging this, I wonder how many of the Guinness Book of World records have been broken. Probably most of them.
Oh, yeah.
When the first, and I'll probably Jeff this, I'm not going to say names, I'm not going to say years because I don't know. When the first 4-minute mile happened, I believe it was Roger Bannister, I believe. Is that true? Do you know the year?
No.
It's not a coincidence that after he broke the record, a bunch of other people broke the record, because that possibility became other people's perspective of, oh, somebody else can do it, why can't I? And we did an episode talking today about your reality becomes the parts of your imagination you hold on to the longest. That is because of perspective. So I wanted to add that to Alan's point. All right, number 3. And okay, before I share, what are inflection points? It's a mathematical term, is it not? Mm-hmm. What is it?
It's a point on a graph that changes the trajectory of the trend.
Wonderful. That's perfect. That's exactly what I needed to. Number 3, reflect on your inflection points. I believe we all have different inflection points. Not bad, right? For you, starting a business, starting a podcast, starting a relationship, ending a relationship, moving, having a child, a tragedy, something amazing, those are all inflection points. And like I said earlier, I think we forget the in-between. I think we see this bullet point and we forget what happened between that bullet point and the next one. So understand that if you can track your inflection points. So for me, the other night, I was hanging out in the living room and Taryn was laying down in bed and she said, hey, I'm going to go to bed. And I said, I'm not ready for bed yet. I'm going to hang out for a little while. And I told her I was just like in my feels. I don't know why. It was one of those nights. I didn't want to go to bed. I wasn't sad, but I just was kind of off. And I turned on YouTube and I went back to old episodes of the Hyperconscious podcast. And that's what I do when I need perspective. And I watched a bunch of old episodes. I watched the interview where I was on Rock Bottom Syndicate with a friend of ours, Joyce Strong, and she was talking about my suicidal thoughts and if I ever thought I would do it again. And that was my first time ever in a television studio, and I was super overwhelmed, and it was awesome. And looking back, that was a huge inflection point for me. All the Brendan Burchard events, those are all inflection points. That's why I talk about them so much. I talk about them so much because those are the things that have created so much perspective in my life. We went and lived in Florida in 2018, huge inflection point. So much perspective looking back on the people, places, things, and ideas that we encountered down there. My first ever high-ticket client, when I was crying in the elevator ride from the 3rd floor to the 1st floor, texting my wonderful fiance saying, hey, baby, we did it. That was a huge inflection point. Now we have however many, 18 high-ticket clients, right? Awesome. What else did I have? 500 episodes. We had a celebration in the studio for 500 episodes. I never expected to make it to 500 episodes. Alan would have never started if he didn't plan on getting there. Our first studio, our first custom studio, that's huge. And getting on my first ever other podcast, which I think was Anthony Trux's show somehow back in the day. Those are all inflection points. And we all have those inflection points. But I think some of us either run from them or we ignore them if they weren't positive. If you can reflect and study your inflection points, those are the points on the graph of growth. You didn't just get from where you were to where you are. There were a bunch of stops along the way. And if you lose sight of those, you're not going to have perspective. You're not going to realize how far you've come. You're not going to realize how little you've grown if that's the truth for you. So look at your inflection points, look at the big things that have happened and figure out, are they trending up? Are they trending down? Are they staying the same? Where is the trajectory of your life based on your inflection points? And that is, again, that's a wonderful exercise for a reflection.
I want people to understand, too, good point on the inflection point thing.
Math is my jam. I don't know if you know this or not, but I went to one of the best technical schools in the world.
You sound like someone I know. Appreciate your humility.
Of course.
I'm just joking.
Hey, Kevin. Kim here. Just wanted to send you a video to say thank you so much for your help on creating the Peaceful Productivity Podcast. You know, I couldn't have done it without you. I knew you'd be lots of great help with the technical aspects of getting the podcast going, but you went well above and beyond that. You helped me with the strategy and you gave me all kinds of really great support. You know, I think the key to success in business is a great attitude. And you have that in spades. You really walk the walk. So thanks again. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
So inflection points aren't always good things. He mentioned a lot of really good things there. They're also bad things, failures. So 26 years old, Kevin has his suicidal ideation. 26 years old, I get in a car accident. My father passes away in a car accident when he was 28. So when I was 26, that was a huge inflection point. So we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's definitely a real thing. And I tell stories about how double yellow lines scared me after that, and how I had claustrophobic issues and all kinds of stuff, and how I used to have to walk through doorways on purpose to get over my claustrophobia. But what we don't talk about enough is post-traumatic growth. And that's what he means by an inflection point, is a Mario Kart booster, good or bad. Every time we fail forward, and we contemplate constantly. Even earlier today, we were contemplating all these different things that we learned this weekend, good and bad. So one of the reasons why I think this right here is more valuable than the previous 92 other ones, is this 93 or 94?
This is 93.
This is 93. One of the reasons why I believe 93 will be more valuable than the previous 92 is because of all the inflection points of contemplation every single time we fail. When we get off this, we'll do an experience review. We'll figure out what we did well, what we didn't do well, what landed, what we don't think landed. And that's another inflection point. So failure and success is usually an inflection point, but those happen on the micro and the macro. Some are huge, like the 500 episode, surprise party, and some are small. 451 episode, and then Kevin and I going, yeah, that was good work, great job. I think we hit a new level there. And that's the other thing too. This is Next Level University, and I like to take us back for a second. We believe that everyone, no matter where you are or where you've been, there's a next level. We know for a fact that there's a next level. No matter how strong you are, you can get stronger. No matter how smart you are, you can get smarter. No matter how wealthy you are, you can get wealthier. No matter how kind you are, you can get kinder. There's a next level. And those inflection points of failure and success are exactly how you accelerate that process. Number 3 for me, I want to start with a quick story here. This past weekend, I'm with a teenager, and it's so cool to hang out with. So our amazing client and friend, Dr. Taryn, we're doing an annual retreat at her place Labor Day weekend, and she's up in Maine. So Emilia and I went this weekend to visit it, and Kevin was there, and we took some footage for the promotion of the event. 10 people, DM us if you're interested. But I got to meet her entire family. She has three kids, and some of them are in their teens, and they're super, super intelligent. And they bought a 3D printer that was like $160 on Amazon, and they showed it to me, and they 3D printed a ring to show me how it works. And it took like 20 minutes to do, but it was the coolest thing ever. I mean, if you've never seen a 3D printer at work, it's like unbelievable how it works. And this thing was only $160, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, can you imagine? And I've been in a lot of factories, by the way. So I used to work in automation. So I've been in all these factories, right? And even back when I was in corporate, which was in like 2014, 2015, 2016, I remember all these factories. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is a mini version of what I saw in factories. And then I extrapolated it out of like, wow, automation has come a really long way. This was a $160 item on Amazon that you could like click and ship to your door. So here's my point. What if we told our parents' that you were going to have a $160 3D printer where you can upload a file, have plastic feed into this thing, have an X, Y, and Z axis that screen prints or 3D prints a ring that you can wear in 20 minutes? This person literally screen printed for I'm going to date myself on this, but I want to do it. Ocarina of Time, N64, one of the best games in history, in my opinion. And this person screen printed an ocarina and then played the Ocarina of Time on the screen printed, 3D printed. I keep saying screen printed, the 3D printed item. It's like if you told your parents, hey, we're going to have these things in our homes, they would have been like, oh my God. 30 years ago, this device would have cost tens of millions of dollars. So there's perspective for all of us. And this is my point. I wrote this down. You have to consistently contemplate the past. This is why I love history books. I read history books before bed, like more often than people think. And the reason why is I want to contemplate the way things used to be so that I don't take the future for granted and I don't take the present for granted. Not to mention everything's an aggregate, so the more you learn about the past, the more you can create the future. And it's really important to have perspective around this stuff, right? I mean, the printing press was an unreasonable breakthrough revolution that changed the world. And now we have 3D printers for $160 in teenagers' homes. It's important to understand, like, this camera right now, Zoom, didn't exist 10 years ago. This camera and the webcam in my laptop didn't exist 5 years ago. So just don't lose sight of that perspective of how high the quality of our life really is versus what we think it is because we see all these other people's amazing lives on Instagram.
Alan, you've been having me read a lot of exponential entrepreneurial books lately. What are some, and there's a lot of extrapolation into the future of what's going to happen and 3D printing, all that happy jazz. But what would you suggest in terms of perspective for books, whether it's biographies, whether it's something like that makes you really open your eyes and realize we're going to have flying cars in a matter of however long? What books would you suggest for overall perspective?
I think the best series is a trilogy, and it's by Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler primarily. They wrote a book, I believe it was 2007 or 8, called Abundance. And then in 2012 or 2014, I forget, they wrote a book called Bold, which I read before Kevin and I even partnered up. And then they also wrote a book called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And that was published publicly, I believe, in 2020. But it doesn't talk about COVID, so it was definitely written prior to that. But those books will give you unbelievable perspective on what's happening in the future. And a real quick story, I know we got a crank here, but I remember Kevin saying, Alan, when you say you want to live to 120, no one knows what you're talking about. And by the way, I don't think half the people believe you. And I said, Kev, by the time I'm that age, I actually think the life expectancy will be over 100. And he's like, Alan, no one knows that, right? And so I'm trying to help other people contemplate what's possible with the exponential. It's called the law of accelerating returns. And it's also the compound effect of technology. So this is a simple way to explain it. I was talking to Amelia in the car about this, and I'll go quick. The way technology goes is the idea is in a decade from now, the capabilities of this phone will be 100x what they are now, but the materials necessary to create that 100 times the power will be 1/10 or 1/100th. I'm sorry, 1/100th. So 1/100th the size for 100 times the power, if you can think about that. What's possible exponentially increases, and we're at we're about to hit a logarithmic, not only population growth but also technological growth. And for the non-math people, it's just more has changed in the last 20 years than the previous 20 centuries. Yeah, and that's hard to fathom.
It is. That's perspective, though. It's a wonderful perspective, especially if it makes you think everything, like rethink everything. Number 4. What is normal now versus what was normal then? The now and the then are truly up to you. I think about, it's interesting. I didn't realize I was this old when I was doing this, but when I was 26, I was still working at the job that I didn't enjoy, but it afforded me a fairly good lifestyle because I was making good money. And I would work second shift. So I would work, well, it would depend. Let's just say I would work first shift. I would work 7 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. I'd work in a school in New Jersey. And at the time I lived in New Hampshire, 10 minutes from where I live now. And for me, that was like a 6.5, 7 hour ride. So I would text my buddies at 3 when I was leaving. I would say, hey, get ready to head out. Hopefully it'll be 7 hours. I might hit traffic. It might take me like 8. But when I get home, make sure the drinks are poured and the weed is out and the video games are good to go. And I would just go home, take a quick shower, change, and we would play video games and get high and get drunk. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that was a normal Friday night, Saturday for me back then. I remember when I lived in New Hampshire, we went out to Nashua and we got unreasonably intoxicated. I had to carry one of my friends from the woods where I lived, and my other friend threw up all over my air mattress and all over my carpet. And that was 26. That was normal. It wasn't anything out of the realm of normalcy. That was just a normal Friday or Saturday night, right? I used to track 5 habits. I used to have 1 coaching call a day, maybe, and then I would hang out because I was like, that was a heavy day. I had a lot of stuff to do. Versus now, and again, this isn't about me. This is about perspective. I'm not saying this to brag. I could do more, and I have to continue doing more if I want to have what I want out of life. But having a day where I do 23 habits and 8 coaching calls, that happens. That happens fairly often now, okay? Going to the gym way more often than I used to. Tracking our business finances every day, when for the vast majority of my life, I didn't track a single finance. I didn't know how to. I didn't understand sales. I didn't understand marketing. I didn't understand margins. I didn't know how businesses worked. If you can take a blip of time right now in this moment and think, okay, what is my normal now? I listen to NLU 5 times a week when I never listened to podcasts before. When I'm driving, and I'm talking about you, not me. When I'm driving, I listen to something educational instead of the radio. Oh, that's powerful. Before I go to bed, I meditate instead of watching TV. I try to make a more educated, more intelligent decision based on the long term of my future versus before just going with the flow. I used to live unconsciously, and then I wanted to live hyper-conscious. That was my old versus my new normal. If, again, like Alan said, some of this can be painful because you might check in, and I've had this happen. I remember I was at a hotel one time in Connecticut getting ready to go to the gym, and I was wearing a tank top. It was summer, and somebody came out and they said, I used to look just like you. You never know what to say because am I supposed to say thank you? Am I supposed to say congrats? Like, I don't know what to say. But that means that their old normal was better than their new normal because they didn't look like I looked like anymore. And that's what they were alluding to. It was almost a joke of, yeah, I used to look just like you. If your new normal doesn't look like your old normal and things are going down, it's time for a shift. And honestly, at least you got the feedback. At least you have the perspective now to make that shift. Is it negative? Does it feel painful? Maybe. But sometimes you need that kick in the butt to start. And sometimes that perspective is hard to look at. But oftentimes it's the biggest pains that create the necessity for us to make the changes that actually have to happen.
Kev, that point, just hammer it one more time. I want to make sure I don't redo. I think I might have the same point as my number 4. Go ahead.
Mine was just new normal versus old normal.
Okay, mine's similar.
Hammer it.
All
the
right,
story
I
will be
never told
different.
the story. Yeah, I never told this story publicly. So I had a stepfather from age 3 to 14, and this is the part of the story I have told before. We went from creating as a family a custom yacht for $250,000 at the time, which now would be well over $500,000. And when he left, he was the main income generator. Our household had such low income that I actually got free lunch at school. That's how poor we were. And so you want to talk about a perspective shift when I'm 14 years old. And not to mention all the other things that come with being the man of the house from such a young age, or the only man in the house, I should say. But what I never told publicly was this story where I went to Tijuana as a kid. So my mom and stepdad and my sister and I traveled to Tijuana. So Tijuana is right on the border of Mexico, and it's one of the poorest per capita places on earth. And at the time, I'm coming from middle class New England American who was doing well as a family at the time prior to when my stepdad left. And that was all the perspective in the world. I remember looking around as a kid and seeing the impoverished people who don't have healthcare, don't have dental, little kids running around to sell you little packs of gum for $0.25. I mean, $100 would have changed the life of all the kids that were surrounding me. And everything was so cheap down there, too. That was another really noticeable thing. And I'm just a kid, so I don't know the macroeconomics of the whole situation. Now I do. And fortunately, I have a good memory, so I can kind of extrapolate all those lessons after the fact. But this is about finding perspective in the journey. It is such an interesting perspective when you travel to a super impoverished country that they don't have the internet, they don't have electricity, they don't have money. The average income in Tijuana, I think, is something like $10 or $15 a day or something like that. And here we are, obviously things are cheaper, so it's all relative. But perspective. My point was this: get outside your normal environment. I didn't want to repeat Kevin's point. I don't think I did. Get outside your normal environment. You have to. I remember I lived in LA for 3.5 months, and it was like, if you took a right, you were in a very dangerous neighborhood that was scary, genuinely. And if you took a left, you were in Sunset Boulevard, two streets up. And it was so much perspective to see some of the poorest, most homeless people living in the same area as some of the wealthiest people. I would literally walk down the street where many famous people walk, and then you'd see a Bentley dealership with multi-$100,000 cars, and then you'd see homeless people in the same street. And it's just fascinating perspective. So again, get outside your normal environment. It's so important. And, how do you think outside the box when you live in one? All of us live in our own sort of echo chambers of the law of attraction. If you're super intelligent, you probably attract intelligent people, so you think everyone's intelligent. If you're super wealthy, you attract wealthy people, so you think everyone's wealthy. If you're not wealthy, you might assume there isn't a lot of wealth in the world because you're only attracting people at that level. It's really important to proactively get outside of whatever your echo chamber is. I don't know what it is, only you can know, but it's so critical to get outside of it.
This will be my last point, and I'll make it quickly. And I want it to land because I think, again, going back to comparison, this is similar to that, but it's way more personal. It's probably way more taboo, but I feel like it's important. And again, we're heart-driven, but no BS. Check in with who you started your journey with. I look back, and there were a bunch of people who started podcasts at the same time Alan and I did. There's a bunch of people who said, I'm going to be in this shape. I'm going to do this. I'm going to chase this dream. I'm going to have this job. I'm going to accomplish this goal. I'm going to move here. On the other end, there's the same thing of people who maybe didn't have a super bright future, but they changed things and they turned things around, and they've made some really impressive things of themselves. They've accomplished a lot of different things. They have a completely different life than they had originally. I know it's difficult, and don't do it from a place of ego, but it's important for me to look around and see who's still here, to see who's growing at the rate we're growing, to see who's called it quits and said, you know what, good enough is enough for me, who isn't doing the podcast anymore, who isn't doing the coaching, who isn't doing the fitness, who isn't trying to better themselves, who isn't in their dream relationship because they have settled. I know it might sound hardcore, it might sound difficult, but that's true perspective, because oftentimes, think of it. And again, not from a place of ego. I don't know anybody else who's done 850 episodes of their podcast. I don't know anybody personally. I don't know anybody else personally who's turned their podcast into a multi-six-figure business. I don't know anybody. That's awesome. That's empowering. And maybe you have that out there too. Maybe you look back and say, yeah, you know what? I have lost a lot of people during this journey. I've distanced myself from people during this journey because I want different and because I am accomplishing different things. And that's a wonderful yet painful piece of perspective. You might be doing way better than you think. Maybe you're not doing as well as you think. That's okay too. But you do have to, you don't know how fast you're going until you look out the window. If you closed your eyes in a car, you would have no idea how fast you're going. But when you see things whipping by, you realize, oh, I'm going faster than I should be. And perspective is important because you need something to look at. Perspective is a comparison between this place and another place. And sometimes that has to do with you looking at people. And I know it can be painful, but I do believe it can be empowering if you let it be.
Quick physics thing. Ooh.
Oh, boy.
Uh-oh.
Oh, boy.
Might take it off the rails right at the end here. We only have a minute. I'm going to be super fast. Let's say I'm in a car and I'm doing 50 miles an hour and someone whips past me at 50. That means they're doing 100. You have to understand something. You have to have something to benchmark yourself against. And that's been the theme of this today, is perspective. You need to have something to benchmark, right? Tijuana was a benchmark of some of the poorest places in the world. And then, some of the mentors that we have that are extremely, extremely wealthy and living with them were, okay, this is the wealthiest people in the world. Now we understand where we fall currently and where we're headed. But one thing that I need to give you as a disclaimer before we go into Q&A, you have to have your benchmarks benched in reality, not the digital world. And you've heard me talk about this time and time again. Make sure your benchmarks are not photoshopped images. Make sure your benchmarks are not staged. There are so many people out there that are painting the best picture that they can in the name of marketing, and that's okay. You have to do that. Marketing is making a product or service or a person appear better than they really are. Marketing is making the burger on the billboard look tastier than it really is. We've all had that experience of, oh my God, that Big Mac looks so delicious. And then we eat it and it's actually still delicious, but it's not nearly as delicious as it looked, right? Marketing is making things look better than they really are. Do not benchmark against marketing, benchmark against reality. And that's why, the Tijuana is such a great example, because you're looking at it. The kids trying to sell me chiclets for $0.25, that's a memory that's seared in my memory. It's not a digital thing that I saw online that could have been doctored, right? You need to benchmark against reality, not digital perception.